You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
I wake up in the morning and I'm feeling a vibe. Give thanks to the Father, I'm breathing alive.
Culture and Flavor is a podcast about food and culture centered in Black and Indigenous foodways, hosted by myself, Zella Palmer, right here in New Orleans, Louisiana. Each episode features high vibrational conversations with cultural bearers, chefs, farmers, scholars, barbecue pit masters, and more. Where there is flavor, there is history. Join me on Culture and Flavor and all of my guests as we share stories that will have you praise dancing, cooking, conjuring, and inspiring your culinary journey. Welcome to another episode of Culture and Flavor with your host, Zella Palmer. Y'all, there is so much to say about Chef Nando Chang, who recently won Best Chef South from the James Beard Foundation held in Chicago. Nando is a leading pioneer in the States for Nikkei, Peruvian-Japanese cuisine in Miami. Born in Chiclayo, Peru, and raised by his grandparents, Nando immigrated to the United States at age 12 with his younger sister Valerie to join their father, Fernando Papa Chang, in pursuit of the American dream. In 2023, he and Val made history as the first siblings to be inducted together into Food and Wine's coveted Best New Chefs class. Itamae AO, which opened in May 2024, was named Esquire's Best New Restaurants and received its first Michelin star in April 2025. I am so excited to have this conversation with Nando. Our mutual friend Remy raves about his omakase, and that is unlike anything that you can try in the States. So just quickly, just a little background knowledge for my listeners and Fernando. I visited Peru last year with my family, and I was blown away by the abundance, biodiversity, and bold flavors of Peru. I visited Lima and Iquitos, and my daughter organized the trip for us, and we ate pollo a la brasa, leche de tigre, ceviche, chifa, and we spent 7 days sitting with Mama Aya, the traditional medicine of Peru. So for this conversation, I'm excited to learn about Chef Nando's life and the contributions of Peru that has made to the global cuisine of the world, and how his family has worked together to be ambassadors for Peru, which preserves some of the world's most amazing cuisines that shares so many cultures: indigenous, African, European, Chinese, and Japanese. So first of all, a huge congratulations to Chef Nando. And it is so awesome that I was able to see you on stage in Chicago, and I just want to give you a huge congratulations for your recent win.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's but the nicest introduction I've ever heard. So
So,
thank you.
no problem. It's amazing. I love to see it. So let me just say to my audience, Peruvian cuisine is fire. If you have never tried it, it is so diverse. Bold flavors. I remember being a teenager, growing up in Chicago, and there was a Peruvian restaurant on the north side, and my dad took me to it, and it always just warmed my heart, and that was one of my favorite places to go after a long day of school. So
That's so cool.
so growing up in Peru in the early part of your life with your grandparents, what did you learn about food and culture in Peru?
Um that I guess more than fortunately for Peruvians, even though we're poor, the majority, um we're so rich with food that it becomes something that you look forward to, not just out of necessity, but because even in our necessity we're looking to put on the best version of that dish. And what I mean is not in the in just on the high end, but your average home cook is trying to make the best version, the one that everybody likes, the one that everybody raves about every time they're cooking. It's almost like how you hear that. I think Italian people are very passionate about food in their families and they're growing up. It's kind of how I grew up with food in Peru, where it was just kind of a lot of things centered around food and what we were going to eat or what we liked eating. So
Hmm.
It's fun.
And so your grandparents, what were some of the lessons you learned from them about Peruvian food?
Um, Lessons I've learned from my grandparents. I'd say, mm, so my grandparents, even though they were of Chinese descent, uh, uh, they enjoy their favorite foods from what I remember growing up was like what we call like criolla, or like Creole food. This is like very, very. Uh, it's like traditional Peruvian food, if you want to call it soul food, if you want to call it from Peru.
Mhm.
Um, and a lot of these dishes were not labor intensive, but they took a long time to make, and a lot of stews, muchos, a lot of guisos and
Mhm.
stews. So it was like something that you start in the morning, and then you don't really get to enjoy until, yeah, until late in the evening. So during the whole day, if my yeah, if my grandma was preparing a lamb stew, I guess the rest of the kind of day revolved around making that stew. So I think maybe the biggest lesson that I learned is that food kept us enjoying our company as a family.
Hmm. And your father would eventually migrate to Miami. Can you talk about the experience your father had in working in a Japanese restaurant and a sushi restaurant?
Yeah, I'll tell you a funny uh, story about this. So my dad, um, both of his parents, my grandparents are very much Asian looking, physically. So when my dad started in a Japanese restaurant, even though he knew nothing, the Japanese owner told my dad that he had to work in the front because he looked too Asian, which gave his restaurant authenticity. And so my dad, because of how he looked, was brought to the front and was taught sushi right away. And he liked it. He understood it, I think, naturally, because it had to do with fish, rice, and it's something that, even though we didn't grow up eating sushi, we grew up eating different versions of the same fish and rice. So I think my dad leaned on it and eventually made a career out of it. You know, but it
Mhm.
but it came to him because of how he looked.
Wow. Wow. Um, so we'll talk about, just about his heritage and your family's heritage. So just a little historical background, just so to put this in context, this conversation in context. So after slavery was abolished in Peru, colonial forces brought the Chinese and Japanese. Although Chinese labor to Peru goes back to the 1500s, the
Mm.
largest migration of indentured was the indentured period of Chinese laborers to Peru, and that was called the Coolie period. And you know what else is really interesting that I found, that they also brought Chinese cooks to cook for laborers, and these Chinese cooks were paid a higher wage than regular laborers, and that to me was so deep. And so in Peru, there's a community called Tucson. And I would love for you just to kind of share when your family came to Peru and about Tucson culture.
Um, my, I want to be very careful, so I'm going to be very honest and say on what I do know and what I do not know. Unfortunately, this is a part of my growing up where we did not necessarily. My grandparents weren't necessarily taught to cherish their heritage at that time. It was more
Mhm.
like you can, but amongst yourselves, but don't make it too loud. It was kind of how being Chinese was looked at in those times for them growing up. So we don't necessarily have like a a detailed and very clear picture of a lot of these things. But I do know that her parents in the 19 and the early 1900s were already in her grandparents were in China, and her parents were born in Peru to Chinese people in the early 1900s.
Wow.
And my grandmother, who was of Chinese of Peruvian-born Chinese parents, never traveled to China, and neither did my dad. So I want to say that that connection was cut abruptly after, yeah, after that, only one, two, three generations back. Yeah. So
Yeah.
I do know of some history, but a lot of it was not. Yeah, it's not something that we preserve very well. I'm ashamed to say that. Sorry.
No, don't be ashamed. I mean, when you really dig into the research, I mean, there's been a lot of, scholars that talked about what Chinese laborers and migrants and Japanese migrants, but specifically Chinese migrants, what they went through.
Mhm.
They were stereotyped. There were actually ads out, during the war with Chile, accusing them and using those stereotypical images. So, of course, you didn't want to be persecuted. You didn't want to, and I
Yeah.
think a lot of them turned to food, as a way to
Yeah.
survive, you know?
Yeah. I think I've thought about this before, and here's it's funny, but it's really such a fascinating idea. I think a lot of things about being Chinese were rejected by other Peruvians at that time, except food.
Hmm.
It's like it makes me laugh because it's like, man, food must have been so good that it's like I hate everything about you except your food. And it's
Mm,
like I think without say, and in Peru, a lot of these things I was not taught to even confront or have a conversation about, or I learned that here. I learned
mm,
that here because I went to school in the US, and I obviously had to learn about American history, and I had to see the battles that different ethnic groups have had to fight here, but with a different kind of mentality. Where in America, I still I at least appreciated that the conversation could be had, like, and I mean like in a classroom, even if it wasn't comfortable. I'm not saying it was, but things were being brought up. I had kids my age who would stand up and say things that I would never have heard in Peru, because you just that culture doesn't really exist in Peru.
mm,
We've accepted kind of how things have been, and that's just nobody really likes to shake that tree up too much.
Interesting.
So I look back at those things now, but I think I look at it through an American lens, and I'm thankful for that, actually.
Hmm. Thank you for sharing that. And so, just to share with you, one of my first meals after days in the jungle of Iquitos, because it's a funny story. My son didn't know that we were going to do the medicine, and my daughter, she didn't tell him, and he's a young man, and he was hungry most because we had to do the dieta, and when you do the medicine, you're not eating you're eating food that doesn't have a whole lot of salt and sugar. It's really
Yeah.
bland food. And so one of our first meals was, at a Chifa restaurant in Lima. And I mean, we smashed it, to say the least.
I love that.
And I was amazed to learn about Chifa culture. And,
Yeah.
even, Peru also has a barrio chino, I think it's calle Capone, if I'm not
La
mistaken.
calle Capón. Yep. Yep. That's in
And
Lima.
in Lima, and it's one
Uh-huh.
of the biggest in Latin America next to Cuba. And my sons are half Cuban, so that's always a treat when we're able to see family in Cuba to go to Barrio Chino and eat there. But the Chinese Chinatown in Peru is booming. And I would love for you to talk about Chifa culture in Peru.
Yeah, so I tell you, there's a couple things that I remember about Chifa is that it, it was always large groups that I remember. Like every time I went to eat Chifa, there was always large groups. It seems like Peruvians had adapted this Chinese way of thinking when it came to at least these restaurants. You'd rather go in a larger group because like the way my Chinese side of the family liked to go out and eat was always in larger groups, and you'd get, I mean, a massive variety of dishes. Maybe you you didn't get two fried rices of the same, but you definitely got three different fried rices and three different styles of duck and three different styles of pork and so I always found it fascinating that I would see families that didn't look like mine eating food that I knew was Chinese and in ways that Chinese people would have it. Like eh, you see that a lot in Peru. Obviously, you go to a chifa and you'll see Peruvian families who have no Chinese descent or whatever, but eating like in a Chinese style, and that's been part of the Peruvian DNA for a very long time. And the other thing that I can remember from chifas is that my grandma had my grandma had this favorite dish, the that's called kamlum wonton, which is basically like fried wontons covered in tamarind sauce with
Mm.
sauteed veggies and protein, and she just it's what it is. It was loaded nachos. It was the Chinese version of loaded nachos, and my grandma loved picking up the crispy wontons and so I think in every restaurant that I've been to as an adult that has chifa, even though I don't necessarily like that dish, I always end up trying it
Mm.
because I would want to know. Like my grandma always said, if your kamlum wonton si el kamlum wonton es bueno, if the kamlum wonton is good, son, then we can eat at that chifa. Because that was like her way of saying, like, I like to tell uh my kids, and I mean my chefs, that because I don't have kids yet, but I would say I like to think of sushi bars the same way. I go, when I try a new sushi bar, the first thing I like to try is a California roll. If you
Mm.
still have love for sushi, your California rolls will tell it. And if you have a good California roll at a sushi bar, I can trust everything else. And it's kind of
Mm.
like maybe subconsciously I've gotten some of that from my grandma, because my grandma used to be like that. If the kamlum wonton was good, this chief is worth it.
Good tip.
And
So my friend Rosa in Toronto, oh, I think she's like the proudest Peruvian I've ever met in life. She taught me a lot about Peruvian culture, and I was so excited to go. And I can't wait to share this episode with her because I know she'll be so proud. And but learning also about so many different cultures, the indigenous cultures of Peru, Africa, Asia. I
Mhm.
mean, and she loved lomo saltado, and what I found so fascinating is just how the Chinese influences in one of the national dishes of lomo saltado, and the fact that you all also don't say salsa de soya, meaning soy sauce. You actually say the actual Chinese word. I think it's siao for
Yeah.
soy.
Hmm.
And I just find that so fascinating that, that Chinese culture has such a huge influence in Peru. What
Yeah.
about Japanese culture?
Well, yeah, I think it's the same. I think it's the same. I just think over the last 25 years, because of the success of Maido and Nobu, I think and obviously I'm forgetting to mention, 10 other influential chefs that really made this style of food so popular in the high end side of our industry, that I think there's just a distinction, like but the influence, it's I think is just as strong. I mean, look at ceviches, right? And now you if you travel to Peru, you would know every ceviche you have nowadays. Does not matter what restaurant you go to, it's going to be fresh fish that's going to be lightly cured now in citrus. Meaning it's going to be tossed in citrus right before you serve it, and boom. That practice is a Japanese practice. That's something that we learned from Japanese cooks. We before Japanese cooks got to Peru, our ceviches were marinated overnight, and you would really let citrus um, cook that protein all the way down. Break that protein down, and then you serve it the next day, right? Like a lot of other ceviches are enjoyed that way around the world. Where Peruvian ceviche is no longer that. This sashimi, that's sashimi style. That we're cutting our fish sashimi style. We're like I said, lightly curing it, which means we're enjoying it raw. I think, yeah, none of those things is possible without Japanese influence on Peruvian food. So yeah, I'd say the influence is there. Just like asaltado, there is no Peruvian restaurant that you will go to that won't have some type of stir fry. And that comes from Chinese. Like, it does not matter if you don't sell Peruvian Chinese food. A Peruvian restaurant will have that influence. That it's part of its DNA now, and it that's just the way it is. I see it as both just as influential. I just think there's a clear distinction because of the food industry, and to what people now know as like, wow, Peruvian Japanese, like fancy. And we perhaps haven't had that yet with Peruvian Chinese food. There hasn't been one Peruvian Chinese restaurant that's elevated Peruvian Chinese food to that point yet. And I, and meanwhile we've had, a couple of examples of Peruvian Japanese food that has achieved high levels. So obviously Maido was just declared, I think, best restaurant in the world a couple of days ago, so or weeks ago. So
Mm. I mean, just the whole trip. I said, I need to come back. I need a couple of months. I need to eat my way through Peru. I need to go to the Amazons. I need to go. I need to go everywhere
that's
because
that's
Peru is
another eating trip.
fire.
Yeah, it's so cool that you're doing it the right way though. That's how you do it. Little by little, every trip you kind of learn a different part, because there's really so much, like you said. There's really so much to explore in Peru.
Mm. Y'all, when we come back after a few messages from our advertisers, make sure you hit that subscribe button. We're going to talk about Itamae, his AO, his new restaurant, new concept that took him all the way to the James Beard Awards to win Best Chef South and a Michelin star. I mean, a lot happened in a year. And he got married and has a dog, from what
That's
Remy
right.
said. So we're going to talk about Nikkei cuisine. We're going to also talk about his love for hip hop. And so we'll be back in a few minutes. Thanks for joining Culture and Flavor.
This episode is brought to you by Plugra European-style butter, crafted for those who demand precision and exceptional results in the kitchen. With 82% butter fat and a slow churn process, Plugra gives you flakier crusts, fluffier cakes, and rich, melt-in-your-mouth pastries. Because great baking starts with great butter. Unlike standard American butters, which have only 80% butter fat, Plugra ensures the ideal moisture and fat balance so your recipes turn out just right every time. That's why professional chefs trust Plugra and home bakers love it. Plugra's slow churn process creates a smooth, creamy butter that gives dough a soft, pliable texture, making rolling, folding, and laminating effortless. Whether you're perfecting a buttery pie crust or layering a delicate croissant, Plugra helps you bake with confidence. Experience the difference for yourself. Find Plugra in stores near you or visit plugra.com. That's Plugra.com.
So I remember back in the day, the late great Anthony Bourdain, who was so dope. I mean, I still like, oh my God, the culture misses him. And he went to Peru. And in an episode, he went to Peru. And for many Americans, that was our first glimpse into the culinary culture of Peru. He met up with one of the forefathers of Peruvian Nikkei cuisine, Japanese Peruvian cuisine, Gaston Acurio. So let's talk about Nikkei cuisine and how you have picked up the torch to bring such a beautiful cuisine to Miami and what makes Nikkei cuisine special.
Um, what makes Nikkei cuisine special is that it's blended and meshed really well with the touch, subtleness, and delicacy of Japanese cuisine without taking away from it. Japanese food is so complex yet so simple to the eye that a lot of fusions, at least in my perspective, don't necessarily mesh that well together. Where with Peruvian Japanese, because the history of this fusion, which is for over 100 years, you've had Japanese families working on these on this cuisine and feeding their families in Peru. So it's not like a couple of chefs who just really thought this would be really cool if we blend this. This has organically happened over decades, and I think uh it's allowed chefs to now display it in the highest form, but it's a very organic fusion, which is what I really think makes Peruvian Japanese food is special, is that it comes from it comes really organically, that's it.
Mm. Yeah, I agree with you. I hate the word fusion. Let me just put that out there, full
Hmm.
stop. It diminishes the people, the culture, migration. I think it's more, the term should actually be adapting to a new world. You know what I mean?
Uh-huh.
And trying to have that hold on to the cultural memory of where you come from by using the ingredients that are in this new world.
Yeah.
And it's like Creole cuisine in New Orleans, the famous dish gumbo. It is not a fusion dish. It's a dish rooted in Africa, created in the New World with indigenous African and European ingredients where everyone had a say so. And it's a conversation about history. And like you said, Peru also has its own criolla cuisine. So
Hmm.
I saw an interview that you did a year ago, and you talked about visiting Peru and sitting down with one of the world's best chefs in Peru, Micha. What was the biggest lesson you learned about yourself and Nikkei cuisine from him?
uh you know First and foremost, my father is the foundation to everything I learned with Japanese cuisine and specifically sushi. But Micha and Maido was the first time that I said, "Oh, this is my lane. This is what I'm going to lean on." I don't know. I don't know if I can explain it in true words what I really felt the first time I had Maido and Micha's food, but I've been chasing that feeling ever since with
Mm,
with Itamae, almost like an addict. You know,
mm,
what have I learned from him is that I think I think that man lives by a true code of honor, and that Maido is not only not only years ahead, but it's just really authentic.
mm,
I don't. I think nowadays, uh, you you can see a lot of. I don't want to get in trouble, but look, I think nowadays it's fairly. You can see when someone's copying other people's work.
that happens all the time in the chef world, you
Yeah,
know?
and
Hmm.
nowadays with how digital access provides us with information, I think unfortunately for me, I've been able to see it. Like, I've been able to see Nikkei restaurants around the world who copy work that Maido does. It's just because you're in other parts of the world, you're kind of getting away with it. I feel
Hmm.
like a lot of Peruvian food in the US was kind of like that, where a lot of restaurants took away from the blueprint Gaston had already
Hmm.
put down, and And I get why, because there's also the other side to the coin, which is a lot of people that open restaurants in Peru, here in the U.S., were just Peruvian families, not Peruvian chefs, and
Mm-hmm.
so the reasons and motives and standards are going to be different,
Mm-hmm.
and I understand that too. I just think I'm talking about chefs and restaurants. I think Maido has always been true to itself, and that's something that I'll never not respect that. That I think they lead with honor and true authenticity. I don't think they. Yeah, I. It seems to me like they've never copied anybody, and that's a weird thing to say about a restaurant. Because it's not like. Yeah, I think in a sense everything's already been done. There's nothing new under the sun. But with that restaurant, I always see them pushing forward, and that's the one thing I will admire until the end, and it's how I've modeled my game at Itamae. One is to not duplicate, and I think what I learned from him was that somehow along the way, even though him and I are not connected in a personal way, we know each other, and obviously I owe much to them. They don't owe anything to us. And even though I've always kind of felt this gap. I grew up here in the US. The moment I got to hear him speak about Itamai, it made me feel like I'd done my job right. That he felt, hey, you have a really authentic way of looking at Peruvian Japanese food, and I really respect it. I think you have you've accomplished your goal if that's what you wanted to do, and that meant more than anything. Now, Mitch has never been to Itamai. He's I think I might have been able to feed him once or in my life at an event with a small bite. So it's one of those where your favorite chef in the world you've never really been able to cook for. You know each other, you've shook hands. I think we have respect for each other, but I haven't had a chance to cook for him. But I think he doesn't need to eat my food is the point. He knows what he knows. And if he can look at me and say, good job, um, I appreciate that you're carving your own lane. I think I think that was pretty cool. I think that Peruvian we need more Peruvian chefs to think that way. Not just like him, but like, not to toot my own horn, but like Val and I think, and we learned that. I think I owe it a lot to, like, the first time I had Eric Ramirez's food in New York
Mm-hmm.
City, where I was like, man, this guy's Peruvian, and this is Peruvian food, but it's not really. It's not like Peruvian, like every other Peruvian restaurant has it. And he's using like seasonal products that are in season in New York. And I've never heard of these fruits or these I don't know, vegetables, and the way he was using techniques from working obviously in all these restaurants in New York. I thought, yeah, if I'm gonna do Peruvian food, it'll be like that. It won't look like Gaston's version or the chefs under Gaston, because for me and Val, it was a necessity to not do it like them. You have to create this identity for yourself, especially in such a competitive market like the US market. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that was really important, is one, understanding who our OGs are, like who are the people that have really laid out the blueprint for Peruvian food in a global scale. Not just seeing what they've done and trying to copy them, because I think also everybody does this when you're young, right? You look at the best at what you like. You look at the best that are doing it, and I think you mimic some of your game after them until you develop your own, and then now you're your own person, and now that's your style, right? And even with fashion, I think we all do that. We dress like the people we like until that becomes kind of your own style, and then that's you. And once you own it, it's yours, and nobody kind of takes that away, because it's your identity. And I think that's the one thing that I learned from Micha and Maido was stick with that kind of thinking, that rationale, which meant be yourself, be yourself, be yourself. It'll pay out eventually, and I think so. I think that's been really encouraging from you know
Mm,
from him and from that restaurant. Yeah,
that's
as
so
you can
dope.
tell, sorry, I'm a really big fan of that restaurant. Always
No,
have been.
no, no, no. And shout out to wow, that's on my bucket list. I mean, there's so many places on bucket list, but I mean, I've heard so much about him over the years, and
Yeah, I,
I thought that was so dope to see you, just have that moment in that interview with him. I thought that was amazing.
yeah. I tell you, the last time I went 2 years ago, I I had I had their tasting menu, and it was like I think they called it like Amazonian.
Mm,
That was the Amazon was like the region that they were exploring with this tasting menu,
mm,
and I walked away thinking like I was like I was mind blown. I was like, wow, that was
mm,
really damn good. That was really damn good. And
mm,
then yeah, to see them where they are now, it's like, yeah,
mm,
I think I remember thinking, wow, I came to this restaurant 10 years ago and it was like really avant-garde, it was like a ceviche that was served dry, and then they would throw like this uh dehydrated like leche de tigre into the bowl, and then they
mm,
would toss all the fish and the proteins. All of a sudden, the powder would become like a liquid, and now you had a little bit of sauce with your fish, and I was mind blown then. And
mm.
now, 10 years after, I'm still coming back as I feel as I'm a much better, well-rounded cook, and I still feel like I'm leaps and bounds behind. It's a funny feeling because I don't feel like that about a lot of restaurants or people, but they always make me feel that.
But I think, like, just changing the culture and changing our perspective, and just removing the toxicity from chef culture, and even when you think about ancient Asian cultures, it wasn't about, copying. It was about learning and experiencing and taking on a journey and learning
Mm.
from the master so that one day you can pass it on to the next generation.
We
And I think, just looking at the work that you've been doing, I think you're on a journey, more so than, just this, competitive, let me post on social media, celebrity culture, things of that nature. And I think that has way more sustainability than the previous model, which, isn't sustainable,
Yep.
or stays in a very closed off niche culture. And it's being exposed in, like, shows like The Bear, and all these other, and even Bourdain talked about that culture, and how it needs to change because it's not sustainable. So you and Valerie, you mentioned Val for some of my listeners, that is his lovely sister. You all have kind of what we call in New Orleans a double shotgun restaurant. Um, and they're two different concepts. So on one side is Matis, which, if I'm not mistaken, is kind of contemporary traditional Peruvian cuisine. And then you have Itamae AO. And how do they complement each other? And how do you both as siblings complement each other as creators?
I think the spaces complement each other because it's kind of like it's kind of like walking into my grandma's house when we were kids,
Mm,
and you would hear two different kids in two different rooms playing two styles of music, and you open, the girls' room and it's playing this, and you open your boys' room and it's playing this, and you're like,
mm,
and it's kind of like that where we coexist. It's our home. It's
mm,
very different, but we coexist, and creatively it's a little bit of the same where um I think Mati's had this really great approach about progressive Peruvian food and what it's going to look like to try to cook traditional Peruvian dishes but with like seasonal ingredients all year round.
mm,
uh, and I think that's kind of the same approach that we have at Itamae, where it's how is Peruvian Japanese food gonna feel like if it was being made in Miami with Miami ingredients by Miami people, and that's kind of what we wanted Itamae to always be like. Like that's why there is scallop with banana. You know, that's
Mhm.
why there's a plátano frito leche de tigre. You know, that's why you'll find mamey or canistel in our barbecue sauce.
Mm.
Yeah, we needed to find things that, yeah, I think that's what we do. We kind of we complement each other because we're different cuisines, but they have it's the same. Um, it's like when your ethics are aligned
Mhm.
with another person, and you just kind of know it's gonna be a smooth ride, you know.
Mm. Sourcing ingredients, especially for start, I know you're not a startup restaurant, but sourcing ingredients is sometimes hard for minority-owned businesses, and the fresh ingredients. Unless you have investors and you can fly in, salmon from Alaska, wild salmon from Alaska, but you pivoted from Itamae to Itamae AO, which is all about water. Tell us about your dry aged seafood program and how water is sacred to your menu.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted the idea of Itamae for me was always, can we cevicherias would be the best comparison that I have. I always those are my favorite type of eateries in Peru,
Mhm.
and that's what I kind of wanted, but with the Japanese element on it. So the ocean has given us everything. I think what we try to do is not just look at Japanese fish, but also things that are surrounding our waters in South Florida, and highlight some of the best that we have by making sure one, in Japanese cuisine or sushi bars at least, sourcing your the highest quality of product is it's the majority of the job, you know.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
then then it's making sure that we treat that that fish or that product and try to present it with pristine condition by the time it's served or sliced. Um, we kind of keep that approach. We're highlighting some of the best that we have, but with how you would do that if this clam was growing in Lima, but it grows here, so we kind of take what we would do at home, but this is home now.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So Miami culture is quite unique. Did you grow up in Miami, if I'm not mistaken? Did you grow up in Miami?
I grew up in Miami and in Broward. My
Oh.
parents were separated. Our parents were separated, and Val and I spent Monday through Thursday in Coral Springs,
Mhm.
or Broward County. My mom moved quite a bit,
Mhm.
and then my dad would be Friday, Saturday, and Sunday in
Gotcha.
Miami.
Gotcha.
So it's like we
Gotcha.
had friends in both places, and we kind of grew up in both places.
Man, I have so many memories of just going to Miami to see family, extended family, and Hialeah, and the Cuban community is super strong there. But Miami also has a long history of many other cultures, Haitian, Jamaican, to name some. How has Miami shaped you talked about using some of the local ingredients and so local seafood, but how has it shaped just your vision for Itamae Ayo? Ayo.
Ah,
That is I messed that up. I'm gonna
no,
delete
you're
that later.
good. Um, you know, I think even before the AO was added and we were the a la carte version of this restaurant, my sister pretty early on in her career had made this like uh I want to say change to how my dad, for example, used to run our little restaurants, where she liked going to the farmers markets. She liked bringing in a box of goodies and saying, "This is fresh. This is what just came in. What are we doing with all this?" And I want to credit her for kind of sparking that. Then after that, I think once you find that as a chef, I think it doesn't matter if it's Miami or anywhere else. We'll keep that same approach. You know, if we were in Chicago, we'd be using the best that Chicago has to offer. And if we'd be in LA, it'd be the same. It's uh, what how has it influenced in Miami specifically? I would say that we use a lot of tropical fruits, which is the one thing that you can count on with Miami
Mhm.
having all year round and having some of the best. Uh, but I think, the biggest change was Val's approach in how we viewed food in our restaurants and our family operations, which was, hey, we have to start cooking with the things that grow here. We don't necessarily have to import frozen ají amarillo or ají rocoto. We should lean on Jimmy Nardellos and Florida Long Hots because these are fresh, and we should do Scotch bonnets and habaneros because people from the Caribbean like these peppers and they're local and they're fresh. And so, a little combination of two of those, of both of those things happening, really.
The evolution of a new Creole cuisine.
Hey, in a sense, right?
Mhm,
I often think that this is what makes Itamae very unique. It's
mhm,
not that. It's just that is that we decide to lean on that, and I'm sure there's another young cook somewhere in the US, in Seattle or LA, who's thinking, yep, that's exactly what I'm going to do. And God bless him. I think that's what's going to make their restaurant that different. That they're like, look, I'm here in, I don't know, Napa, and this is all the stuff that grows year round. And
mhm,
and now it's like a Peruvian-Japanese menu that's like California style. And it's like,
mhm.
and that's what I think the beauty is that because it's immigrant food, it will continue to adapt no matter where it goes.
Ashe. So here in New Orleans, there's a lot of buzz about Michelin finally coming. And I'm not sure why New Orleans got left out of the numbers. But anyway, so a lot of restaurants in New Orleans have a strong desire to gain one of the Michelin star, or be recognized by Michelin. Now, your restaurant was awarded a Michelin star. Can you talk about that journey to Michelin?
Um, it was, I guess, I don't know. I haven't really looked back at this yet. I'm very grateful that we were considered for this. Um, I think as a team, you work so hard that it's just a really nice moment that vindicates why we've been kind of pushing each other more than we know others are. And I don't know. I think I've kind of just left it at that. Like, I'm grateful, um, but I'm not sure if I've overthought it or figured out. Did I figure out a blueprint to get there? I don't think so. I want to tell you that the same restaurant, and maybe not the same as the experience, but Itamae, before it was AO, when it was a la carte in the design district, which was, we were in a mall in a courtyard, it was the same food. It was the same three, four things that people love about Itamae. The freshness of the product, its salt, its its spice, and then I think its story, which was rooted on a family of Chinese Peruvian immigrants in Miami, and
Mm,
we got a bib gourmand 3 years ago. All
mm,
we did really is change the format. Obviously, we went to a tasting menu, and I think as you do that, you evolve a little bit. You want to start doing things with more precision, and
mhm,
elevate everything you are able to elevate, because now you're in control of so much more things. Um, but I'm not sure if I look back at it as like, oh, I think we figured out why they gave us one, or how I. No, I don't think so. I think I think I look at it the same. I think we were the same. We have been the same for 6, 7 years now as a restaurant. I just think yeah, I guess we would have to. It would be interesting to hear, I guess, these things from a real inspector someday, right? To wonder,
Mm-hmm.
hey, what makes you think that that restaurant is better than others? Because I'm sure you, like, I mean, I'm sure myself, like you and others, have had this reaction to maybe some restaurants that we've been to that are 1 star or 2 stars that you go, I'm confused. That wasn't as
How,
good as
Sway?
I thought it would be. Right.
Yeah.
So I think that's really what we're asking, which is, and really, I would say, I confess, I've had the same reactions to many things, like to many restaurants like that. So no, I don't know. I hope that people don't feel that way about us. That.
Mm-hmm.
But I also feel like in this day and age, it's very I don't know. I have to be very careful with this. I often
Yeah.
hear when guests come to the counter, and the first thing they start thinking about is that, oh yeah, I heard this got a 1 star, or this, and it's almost like, I wish you were just coming to enjoy a restaurant, and just don't
Mm-hmm.
worry about whether it's got a 1 star or 2 stars. Don't worry about that. Just worry about having a good time, and then after your meal and your experience, you're able to say, like, oh wow, I had a really good meal, and that's a 1 star. I don't know, like, judge it based on how you are feeling from the moment you come in. Don't let the narrative be so much about what it has or what it doesn't from the Michelin guide, because I can promise you, most cooks in our industry don't give a damn. Most
Mm-hmm.
people that get up to go to work in a restaurant don't care about these things. What they care about is that they feel good in the place that they work. And
Mm-hmm.
so I don't know. Does any group deserve less than others? It's a hard thing to say, because at the end, I don't know. I think it can work for you, and I think it can work against you. So I think you just have to take it, accept it, be happy for those that receive those blessings, and when you get yours, yeah, just be grateful, be happy. But I really have not made it to that point where I'm gonna let it get me too high or too low.
Mm-hmm.
And not to compare it to the James Beard, but I'll tell you, it was a totally different reaction in my body internally
Mm.
to achieving each one of these things separately.
How so?
I don't know. I don't have an answer. I just know how I felt. I know how
Mm.
I felt every second when your name was announced. I know how I felt that night at the Michelin ceremony, which was like, um gosh, if since we're on this lane of honesty, I'll tell you, I felt relief during Michelin. If that's
Mm-hmm.
if that's a funny way to put it, I felt that when I heard my name, I felt relief instead of joy. Not sure why.
Mm.
With with the James B, I don't know if it's because I watched Val win it last year, but I just felt I just felt extreme joy inside of my heart. It was
Mm.
just a different. It was. I didn't think about my team right away, and you usually do. You're like, my God, so many people that have helped me get here. It's what's really going through your mind. Where this was just joy that this was my journey, that I'd come to this country when I was a kid, and that, yeah, that my dad brought me here. That was.
Mm. Mm. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people can, really would appreciate, just the feeling behind it, because that's pretty monumental. You and your sister, James Beard, Michelin, that's pretty monumental. And so If someone walks in, a diner patron, new diner patron walks in to Itamae, what would they experience? Paint a picture.
So I'll tell you, it's like a 10, it's a very intimate setting. We have 10 seats at the counter. It's pretty dim on the light. A lot of wood and stone uh textures feel. You will hear the sub. You hear the subwoofer as soon as you sit down. You'll
Mhm.
feel some of that vibration around, your legs. It's not. I don't like to think of it as uncomfortable. I'm very, I'm very cognizant of the fact that I used to I used to enjoy this music a little too loud. So, and not everybody else does. So I try to find a good balance, and I think that's something. It's a nice subtle touch that you'll hear a sub right away. You won't hear the vocals. Like, it's not like you'll hear rap right on top of you the moment you sit down, but I think it creates a mood. It's almost like how it felt for me to walk into a studio when I was recording music, and that's kind of how I wanted AO to feel, like as if we were having a studio session, which most
Mm,
guests are not coming in for that. And I think that's a cool thing about AO, that it feels very personal. It's almost like, yeah, like I think of it as that, like a studio session. That was the idea behind it.
mm. Well, I have to say that I really enjoyed your music. I got to check it out. You've got bars. I will definitely say you've got bars. And some of your songs talks about food. You have an album called Ceviche. And so much of hip hop, or even going back to blues artists, I always talk about this. They always rapped about what they ate. Even, salsa singers from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, they talk about chitlins, arroz con habichuelas, all the way to oodles and noodles. And when you think about like legendary hip hop groups like Wu-Tang, that cross-cultural exchange forever changed the world. And your song Sushi Chef had me bopping all morning. And I'm like, okay. So food, music, rhythm, soul, and movement and black and brown cultures is so deep when making food. And you talked about how hip hop is part of the aesthetic of Itamae. I would love for you to just share with our audience one question, and it's from the old school movie. When did you fall in love with hip hop?
I fell in love with hip hop, I want to say, somewhere around that first year that I'd gotten to the States. I think
Mm.
I thought, yeah, the first time I saw somebody wear like baggy jean shorts and a jersey in school, I was like, oh, that's how I'm gonna dress. I'm gonna tell my mom now. That is exactly what I want my
I know
outfits to
she was
look
like,
like.
"Como?"
Yeah, correct, correct. She's like, ¿qué? No, she wanted me in what if my mom would want? Oh my god, my mom was gonna kill me. My mom would want me in a freaking Abercrombie and Fitch jeans and a and a t-shirt, because that's what my mom's thinking, like the nice American kids wear this, and it's like I don't give a but none of my friends wear that, mom. But my mom is also, yeah, unfortunately, it was that mentality when you first come to this country, which is, hey, don't be too loud, don't
Mm,
don't make too much of a, don't stand out too much, fall in with the crowd, and
mm,
I came home from school going, oh no, I like the loudness, and I
mm,
like that. That's what my heart desires. And thankfully, my mom at some point realized that and let me lean on that. Uh, my mom was married to an American man, whose sister was married to a dude from Chicago, who eventually became
Oh.
my uncle Damon Forbes. And my uncle Damon was a rapper, and
Mm,
not just a rapper. Rapper is probably one of the things he did, but he was a poet. This man was a writer. This man just used music at some point to write.
mm,
Uh, and for whatever reason, I spent, I think, a full summer with him where I would go to his house and he would let me play or pick different artists. But what he would do is he'd like pick the CD. This is when, we had the CD cases, and you would flip through it and be like, I'll pick that
Mhm.
one. And I would pick him based on the aesthetic of the cover because I knew nothing of it. I would say that one. And then he would play a whole record. And then he would tell me about these groups. So
Mm.
I I th- I that's probably what did it. That
Mm.
I fell in love right there during that time. And he was big into God, like Outcasts,
Mm.
uh, Goody Mob, then
Mhm.
everything that had to do, obviously, in New York that was happening, that the Nas, the Jay-Z's of the world, and he, I don't know, he just passed that on to me, and I never looked back.
Mm.
Like I think everything about my sense of self post that point changed. Like I dropped everything else that I was for whatever long there was before. Like I never went back to listening or liking the same soft rock songs that I liked when I was a kid.
Mm.
And I probably enjoy those songs. And if I hear it now, I'm like, oh my God, I know that song. But it didn't beat my heart anymore. It wasn't the beat to my heart anymore. That was hip hop. And then as an immigrant, I think when you first come into this country, you need identity. And
Mhm.
that gave me a pretty clear identity, because I went to a school where my day started in ESOL with other immigrant kids who I had the same challenges. Like you're basically all of you are being told, when you first come here, this is how you're gonna start. So your day is surrounded by that. It's not like you go to a regular classroom and hey, figure it out. So I kind of had to see what these other kids who were in the same situations like me were doing, and a lot of the Latino kids would either lean in, like I said, on the on the Abercrombie and Fitch, and a
Mhm.
couple of us started wearing Echo at that time, or
Mm.
you know, uh, and I don't know, I had a preference for for that style, and probably had to do a lot with my growing up in Peru. Um, but I just, yeah, my whole life after that was based on that. I mean, even my sushi chef career comes because I needed a job that could basically pay me really well, but if I could just work for it part-time, I would have the rest of my day to make music. And I spent a good 6 7 years of my life doing that, meaning working 40 hours, 45 hours a week. And the rest of my day was about making music. So the job that I found that could pay me the most was sushi, because it wasn't, a young sushi chef is harder to find than a young just chef. Many young chefs don't specialize in sushi right away. So the fact that I had received all this kind of information from my dad, it gave me it made it easier for me, because I knew that I could walk into a sushi bar and say, hey, my specialty is, like, I can butcher for you, I can break down all this fish, and I can be out of your sight by 4 o'clock. And a lot of chefs will be like, oh great, this is a guy I can hire. I don't have to come in the morning. He comes in the morning, he preps the rice, he preps the fish, and then he goes to do something at night, so he doesn't want to work here. And that's kind of how I lived for 7 years. And that had to do with me loving music. Like
Mm.
my job was secondary to music. It's just what I needed to do to be able to make music. And when I couldn't no longer make music for a living, then I leaned in on my cooking for good. Then I said, okay, I tried it, I had fun. Now it's time for me to get serious about, cooking. And that's kind of how my journey has been. But I swear to you, like music was my only priority for
Mm,
such a long time. I still do, and that is why hip hop is a part of AO. It's not a playlist. It's not a damn playlist. This isn't like a 5 minute, like, no, this is part of who I am. This is
mm,
part of really like me becoming a young American. Was that like I really, I could
mm,
remember going into sushi bars and being told like I don't like that kind of music, especially
mhm,
for like sushi or high end food. And I was like, it's the only music I like. So when I have my spot, you're gonna stop telling me what kind of music I can play here. And part
mm,
of that is this. Now top that with the fact that I feel hip hop has changed so much and we've lost so much of what made me fall in
mhm,
love with it, that for me, when you're sitting at AO, if you're listening to like a really dope Nas album,
mhm,
I think it's a subtle nudge to who we really, really, truly are. That I think
mm,
we're actually putting on what we consider like not just great food, but great hip hop too. It's like
mm,
it's I don't know. It might be crazy because I think 95% of the people that come to AL don't even understand why the songs that are playing or who we're really picking. I think some people do and enjoy the playlist a lot. In fact, I've seen a bunch of people download these playlists on our Spotify, but I think identity wise, it gives me also that there is a moment during service where I know what songs are playing and I'm singing them. And I may be the only one out of the group of 5 people who are working who's really truly listening to that. And it's really selfish to admit this to you, but that is why that exists, because it gives me the ability to be myself. It gives me that extra
mhm,
push to 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 fillet something nice or plate it the way I really was inspired to do it in that moment. And music has a lot to do with it, and that is part of Itamae.
mm. And food and music is such a frequency, and to commend you for, creating a space that is uniquely yours, but also pays homage, to um a genre of music that always gets demonized.
Yeah.
Those true hip hop lovers, know that these are storytellers, these are
Yeah.
poets, and even when I think about even what's happening in Peru, like I have a lot of friends in New Orleans who are Cuban musicians, and they're always talking about like this artist, he's a cubaton artist, Wampi, and how cubaton is like the version of reggaeton but in Cuba. And then there's a lot of Cuban musicians that are now all in Peru, and they're like kind of like really working and playing for a lot of the young Peruvians. And that's what hip hop, you know really was about. You know
Right.
what I mean? Reaching young people and telling stories, because I mean, who understands, what's really going on. And so I just want to come in because I'm a hip hop head, and I would love to have a listening session when I come to AO. I want to definitely have a listening session,
We
and I want to know
absolutely
what's
will.
on your playlist too. What are some of the songs that just like, that you said, this is who I am, this is who I relate to? Like, what artist is there? A particular song? Is it Mortal Technique, Dead Prez, Nas, like you said,
Oh
who is
God,
it? Tupac.
I do have that. So we break down the playlist by moods
Hmm.
at AO. The playlist I play the most is called Kitchen We're Seated. Uh,
Okay. You
that's
have to
like
send that to me. I definitely want to hear that.
and that's like a lot of that's like okay. So here's the thoughts. The Kitchen We're Seated playlist the priority is great, great beats with good lyrics. Not
Mm,
great lyrics yet. That's bar school sports. That's another playlist.
mm,
But on this playlist is kind of like mood setters. So for me, I have a lot of Action Bronson,
mhm,
a lot of Kendrick, obviously.
mhm,
Um JID.
Okay.
um, Denzel Curry, Mac
Oh,
Miller, or
I love Denzel
Mick
Curry.
Jenkins.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that drops, like if the clips just dropped, we're gonna drop that we're gonna put that on the playlist.
Denzel
Nothing
Curry's
that's
"Walking" is my
90s, and
anthem.
nothing
Denzel.
that's, oh my god, and Denzel he's from here, he's from Miami, so
Mm-hmm.
but I'll have like also like Dochi,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
then we'll
Shout
have
out to
like
Doechii.
Samara Sin, who's like
Mm,
somebody I started like listening to like the last year or two and really
mm-hmm.
like ASAP,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll have like everything. Then
Mm,
then I have a playlist for Spanish hip hop that's called Lengua Madre that I do like to
mm,
play quite a bit because I like
mm-hmm.
I like I like also rap in Spanish a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh then then the majority of the time when we're not playing the kitchen we're seating, we'll play the what that Badu do, which is like
Ooh.
it's like everything that you can think of that's an Erica Badu vibe.
Yeah,
But like
yeah.
everything, including like everything, even Thames, some Drake,
Mm-hmm.
and that's kind of like the AO vibes. I kind of think of it like music that I really heard in high school, really.
Mm, mm,
But then I have like the playlist. It's pretty current too. So you'll find some Gunna, some Future. I just don't.
mm-hmm.
I don't like. I do like to play the music. So I eventually we're gonna hear all the lyrics, and
Mm-hmm.
I try to be sensitive about those things and what's going to be said and whatnot because I can recognize that
Mm-hmm.
our words can make people feel uncomfortable. So as much as I want
Mm-hmm.
to play
Mm-hmm.
everything, I just have to pick my spots.
For sure. For sure. For sure. Um, so this was such a beautiful conversation, I have to say. Um, and we're gonna end this kind of last question, bringing it back to familia, to family.
Hmm.
What was the greatest lesson you learned from your father, and how integral is family and your staff to Itamae?
Um, the biggest, I guess, one of the biggest things that my dad's always taught me is that you don't, you don't abandon your ship until the end. You're the first one in, the last one out. You're everybody's personal therapist, and you have to embrace that. That if you're gonna own a restaurant, it's not going to be about cooking. It's really going to be about everything else that that you have to do. And even though I've had many opportunities in my life to not work with family, I think my dad's always taught us that look, success feels great. Success with family is a totally different feeling. It's yeah, I cannot tell you what I felt when I heard Chef Nina Compton say my name. I truly cannot. It was such a warm, wonderful 5 seconds to feel like to go through that. But I can also not tell you how I felt exactly when I heard my sister's name go. I
Mm,
I was yeah, and I'm not sure if maybe that is the one thing that Val and I will always cherish over everything. It's probably
mm,
that yeah, it's cool. Like it's cool to make it's cool. It's cool to achieve things in a restaurant. Obviously, it's a lot of work. But
mm,
when you do it with your family, it just has a different weight to it. It just does. And that just means the most. That we did it as a family. It wasn't about we did it as a great restaurant, as a great group, because I have great cooks or managers or somms. It's at the end, if any of these restaurants work, is because we kept working as a family. Now operations, everything is different. Every restaurant will have its own journey, but the nucleus of the company is much more dependent on our family than the business itself.
Mm. That's so beautiful. And I'm going to end this beautiful podcast interview. Um, Andre 3000 once said, the South has something to say. I believe the global South has something to say, and we're seeing it. We're seeing it. We're
I
seeing
believe
it.
that. I
We're
believe that.
seeing it.
That's so funny. You're so
Mhm,
right.
mhm.
You're damn right. Appreciate this conversation.
Much love. Much love.
Thank you so much.
I wake up in the morning and I feeling a vibe. Give thanks to the Father, I'm breathing alive.
Culture and Flavor is powered by Simplecast. Thanks for listening to Heritage Radio Network, food radio supported by you. Keep in touch at heritageradionetwork.org.